and, specifically, the coronavirus, pandemic, and of course other issues played out in the country and affected so many things.
Yeah, indeed, for sure. The good, the bad, and the ugly, of course, and that's what the year takes alone. And as we continue our review of the year 2020, we must recall President Muhammadu Buhari's October 1st broadcast to the nation, in which he called on Nigerians to set aside their differences to work together in the overall interest of the nation.
Indeed, and of course that's in continuation with efforts to, of course, foster national integration. Yeah. Now, while that message, should be a mantra, for every sector of the economy, to strive forward to national unity, 2020 was also the 50th anniversary of the end of Nigerian Civil War. Of course, we remember the no victor, no vanquished theme, which was further, celebrated, and of course celebrated the spirit of oneness in Nigeria. And
that's what keeps us going through all the time, really. And the Buhari administration also clocked 5 years on May 29, 2020, and critics benchmarked the administration's performance against the criteria of national security, corruption, economy, and social welfare, which formed the core of the president's 2015 campaign message. And despite pockets of attacks on soft targets once in a while, what critics cannot dispute, however, is the level of improved security and the gains recorded in the fight against corruption.
Of course, you're quite right, Yusuf. And on October 1st, 2020, Nigeria marked 60 years since the Union Jack was lowered in the country. Now, that celebration necessitated a look back at Nigeria over the past 6 decades, and of course, the role, of the political elites in shaping the nation up to now.
And after learning from the logistics nightmare of the 2019 general elections, INEC deregistered 74 political parties in 2020, leaving 18 political parties standing. And from the strange deaths reported in Kano to the NSAS protests, which turned chaotic following the rampage after it was hijacked by hoodlums, everyone agreed it has been a strange and eventful 2020 indeed, and most anxious to see it pass. Don't you look at it?
Everybody is. You don't have to be so anxious. In just a couple of hours or a few days, it will be over. But absolutely, Yusuf, despite the ups and downs of 2020, as we have earlier mentioned, there were some memorable events. And indeed, I must be specific, really, before we talk about the successful conduct of elections in Ondo and Edo states. We must also look at, the opportunities that the coronavirus itself, also brought. Yes, it was a threat. The pandemic, was seen as a threat to many countries, the economies of many countries, but we also saw that a lot of people, were also made, some entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs were built, people started manufacturing. I mean, today we can manufacture, the face masks we use are produced here. Yeah. The face shields we use are produced here. So quite a number of people, were able to, come up with new products and services. So it was not really all bad for the country. And also our political journey, we have made some inroads. If you consider about 21 years ago when we commenced on this civilian democratic journey, we have maintained a steady and peaceful trajectory. In a few days' time, we will exit 21 years of unbroken democracy. So that's something we should be looking back at and, of course, be joyful. So that's how we will begin today again as we look back at some of the political issues that defined 2020 on Good Morning Nigeria. I am Claire Delabo Abdul Razak. We welcome you as always, and it's good to see everyone.
And I'm Yusuf Nadab Usman. It is our pleasure always to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the NTA. And in continuation of the 2020 highlights of Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall focus on some issues of Nigeria's political outlook in 2020.
And we will also have a companion segment that's talking about newspaper review. Bayo will join us later. There'll be business news, and if we do have time, we will look at other development in sports. But for now, Chimobi Walter Naji is joining us in the newsroom, and he's already seated with the morning news. Chimobi, what's cooking?
Hello, good morning, Claire. Good to join you this morning, and good morning, Madabo. Good morning, Nigerians. Here is the morning news. President Muhammadu Buhari has given strong assurances that his administration will keep a keen eye on food inflation in the new year and directed the Central Bank of Nigeria to shut its doors against all those importing food into the country. This was at the 5th regular meeting with members of the Presidential Economic Advisory Council held virtually. The federal government has refuted claims making the rounds that the country will face scarcity of maize in 2021 as forecast agro-processors inadequate support to growers of the produce. The federal government and the Central Bank of Nigeria believe that maize farmers are producing more than enough to meet local demands.
And the actual demand for all the maize processors, maize human consumption is just 8 million tons.
Now to security, the Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, has admonished communities terrorized by bandits and kidnappers to assist with information as a joint task force comprising mobile police and vigilante groups embark on clearance operation in Mashegu local government area of Niger State. The Commissioner of Police, Niger State Command, Adamu Usman, delivered the IGP's goodwill message to members of the task force during a visit to Garden Kasanga in Mashegu local government area of the state.
As well, we feel bandits are camped in those areas. The community have expressed their determination to protect their community, and the Commissioner of Police decided to support them with PMF so that they carry out this operation.
Now, COVID-19 data in the country shows that 16 out of every 100 tests carried out are positive. Chairman, Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 and Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, at Tuesday's briefing, observed that low testing rate in some states is not helping the national response despite the huge financial resources and logistics made available to subnational entities.
To reopen all laboratories and ensure that testing is expanded and turnaround time for results is substantially reduced.
And latest data from the Nigeria Center for Disease Control (NCDC) show some 749 new COVID-19 infections have been recorded in 17 states and the FCT, bringing the total number of the confirmed cases to 85,560 in Nigeria. Of these 749 new cases, Lagos has 299, Plateau 131, Kaduna 83. The FCT has 74, Kwara 35, Sokoto 26, Edo has 18, Kano 17, Katsina has 16, Delta 11, Nasarawa 10, Ondo and Bauchi recorded 9 each. Rivers has 5, Akwa Ibom 3, while Jigawa, Osun and Ekiti confirmed 1 new case each. On cases per state charts, Lagos remains top with 29,184 cases. Next is the FCT with 11,433 cases, followed by Kaduna with 5,071 cases and Plateau with 4,755. Total confirmed cases, a total of 937,712 samples have been tested so far across the country, and some 12,356 cases are currently active. On a positive note, 71,937 patients have recovered and been discharged, with an unfortunate 1,267 deaths. Now, the ECOWAS Election Observation Mission in Nigerian Republic has declared the December 27th presidential and legislative elections as orderly, peaceful, and professionally conducted. The head of missions and former Nigeria's Vice President, Muhammad Nabandi Sambo, who presented the ECOWAS position, expressed satisfaction with steps and measures taken by the government to ensure the security of electoral process and the safety of electoral officials, candidates, voters, and observers during the election. While calling for improvements on the shortcoming observed during the election, the mission urged key players to respect and protect the democratic principles guiding electoral processes. All right, and that concludes the morning news. Good morning, Nigeria. 2020 review continues with Claire and Yusuf just after the break. Stay with us.
A scorecard like no other. Government has put in place measures and initiatives principally targeted at youths, women, and the most vulnerable groups in our society. These included broad plan to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in the next 10 years, the creation of 75 billion Naira National Youth Investment Fund to provide opportunities for the youths, and the Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Survival Fund, through which government is A. Paying 3-month salaries of the staff of 100,000 micro, small and medium enterprises. B. Paying for the registration of 250,000 businesses at the Corporate Affairs Commission. C. Giving a grant of 30,000 Naira to 100,000 artisans and guaranteeing market for the product of traders. These are in addition to many other initiatives such as farmer money, trader money, market money, N-Power, N-Tech, and N-Agro. These and more in spite of a recession and a global pandemic. Although social media as a channel of communication is inherently harmless, it becomes harmful and damaging when used without discretion and thoughtfulness. Bad social media users spread rumors and fake news without verification. But good social media users stop, reflect, and verify information before sharing it. Be a good social media user. Stop the spread of fake news. Verify the authenticity of your source and use social media responsibly for a better Nigeria. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, in collaboration with the National Orientation Agency. The Council of Our Fathers.
My advice to these young people is please do not take us back to those harrowing days. You probably do not know what it is.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
Life can be very eventful. We curiously expect things to happen, even when we don't know what. Our human nature makes us like and repost lots of information. Some are unverified, inciting anger and hate. Sometimes innocently, other times the urge to break it first. This, in most cases, has caused destruction in many nations.
what?
What?
I scored a hat trick today.
Cool.
Wow.
And how did you celebrate?
Just do your hands like
And
this.
hold your nose like this.
Body odor is caused by germs. That's why you need the new improved Dettol Cool Soap, which protects against 99.9% odor-causing germs with an extra burst of menthol freshness. Dettol, be 100% sure.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live from the studios of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, experts say single-digit inflation is still attainable in Nigeria, but with concerted efforts by governments at all levels. Chimobi Holtonaji is standing by with details on business news.
Before the upsurge of the global pandemic, Nigeria's economy was already on its way to achieving single-digit inflation rate, but this was scuttled with the global recession due to COVID-19 and a crash of oil prices, putting pressure on the naira and the local economy. World Bank Country Director for Nigeria, Shubham Chaudhary, says the single-digit inflation is achievable for Nigeria, but policymakers need to prioritize expenditures and focus attention on price stability and control.
I think in the middle of a COVID crisis, with all the disruption that it has caused, I think it will be more challenging to bring inflation down, but not impossible. One of the things is, oil prices are low, and oil often feeds into the prices of other things because of the cost of transportation, things like that. So that's a good thing. On the other hand, the disruptions to supply chains and the fact that it's taking longer to get actually goods on time and you have to take more care will add to the inflation pressures on the upside.
In another development, the federal government is developing a sustainable model that will encourage local production of automobiles in the country through building 3 industrial parks in the country to strengthen the sector through a public-private partnership arrangement.
We met with a number of other stakeholders, Bank of Industry, to see how we can move forward and finance these projects, because we envision them to be PPP. But nonetheless, we have already actually started the preliminary construction of the facilities at these parks. So government is showing commitment, and then hopefully this will show how serious this administration is to Nigerians and to the global community, that we are ready for business, that we are ready to improve and produce local components that go into automobiles.
With business news, I'm Chimubi Walter Naji.
All right, Chimubi, thank you. Coming up next on Good Morning Nigeria is the newspaper review.
Well, Bayo Atebi is already here. Good morning, Bayo.
Good morning, Nadawu. Good morning, Claire.
Good morning,
Nigeria.
Bayo. I'm closer to you today, so we gotta keep the time.
Okay, I'll watch it.
All right, so let's start off with the Daily Trust.
All right.
And the Daily Trust is leading with the economy story. It says 56-year-old Kaduna's only textile company sacks 300 staff. And the writers there, we are only downsizing, that's the company, UNTL. No cotton for factory because of banditry, that says the union members. Stop smuggling, patronize local industries. This is coming from Issa Aremu. I want to believe that. And then you see the picture stories of the scenario, the premises of the gates, entrance of the factory. You see the gates locked. And then you see, of course, the product of the company also being displayed there. And then you see the premises of this 56-year-old UNTL, and then the names of sacked workers displayed on the notice board also right there on the screen. Away from that story, troops kill bandits along Kaduna-Abuja road. It's on page 6. And just below that story, tales of breakthroughs, hurdles for science and tech in 2020. It's on page 14. Now, COVID-19 killed 4 doctors, infected 476 medical workers. That's the FCTA on page 4. 2 children die in Zaria tanker fire. It's on page 29. And a little below the nameplate, ports gridlock reactions as Lagos government plans takeover. It's on page 14. And Nigerian stocks head for best annual run since 2013. Okay. Yes, sir.
Okay, we have the Punch here, and the main story on the Punch is federal government adopting wrong strategies to address bad economy. And this is coming from Obasanjo, Utomi, and others. And the writers here, don't blame God for Nigeria's woes, Obasanjo tells nation's leaders. And the second writer is, we are facing hunger. Insurgents dislodging farmers, says my life here. And I will fight food inflation in 2021. Oil industry in turmoil, says Buhari. Details of this story will be gotten on page 2. Still in the Punch, you find stories from other areas. Default on loans with collateral worsened in fourth quarter, according to the CBN. Details on page 21. I never called for a coup against Buhari, Kuka says. And you get the details of that story on page 9. And then farms grown as ministry delays its patriot quota approval, page 21. Buhari to sign 2021 budget on Thursday, still on page 21. 21 is really loaded. Down on the below the page down there, we get stories from FCT threatens clamp down on businesses for COVID-19 protocols violations. Details on page 9. 9 bandits killed along Kaduna-Abuja highway from a commissioner, that is on page 24. And on page 7, Borno arms hunters to battle Boko Haram. On page 15 of the Punch, January will be tough, spike in COVID-19 infections imminent, according to the NCDC. And then on page 7, you get the story that says 6 Katsina bandits killed and 23 kidnapped victims rescued. And finally, we have this story on page 24, which says, comply with directive on crossover service, counters churches. Bayo?
Thank you. Let's start with the economic story. President Muhammadu Buhari has emphasized that going back to the land is the way out for Nigeria. Already, about 7 states are producing all the rice we need. Accordingly, the Central Bank of Nigeria has been directed not to provide foreign exchange for the importation of food. At the same time, measures are to be taken to ensure that inflation is curtailed. This is what the president said to the 5th meeting of the Presidential Economic Advisory Council yesterday. And the president said, looking back, the president said, we would have been in trouble if our borders were not closed. If the country had not embraced agriculture, where would Nigeria have found itself, especially faced with the devastating economic downturn brought about by the COVID-19? The president says in the era of dwindling petrol, the era of depending on petrol is gone. And with the oil industry in turmoil, we must produce what we eat and eat what we produce. We must not lose the opportunity to make life easy for the ordinary people. Still on the economy, there are indications that the president will assent to the 2021 appropriation bill tomorrow. This is reported to have been confirmed by the senior special assistant to the president, Garba Shehu. The National Assembly, it may be recalled, passed the 13.58 trillion budget last week before proceeding on its Xmas and New Year break. The desire to return the January-December budget cycle was achieved in 2020 when the budget was signed on December 17th last year. 2021 budget is likely to be signed on 31st of December. That is tomorrow. There's good news from the commercial banks. 13 commercial banks have posted financial results indicating that they raked in 36.75 trillion as deposit in spite of COVID-19. This day compilation indicated that this is 23% increase over the same period of 2019 where there was no COVID-19. This is attributed to the deployment of technology as well as a bank's aggressive marketing strategy. But sometimes one begins to wonder why the banks were also threatening with all this initiative to downsize some of their workers.
Indeed.
No wonder the central bank ordered that initiative should be stopped. The other worrying story which you read from the Daily Trust is the UNTL disengaging 300 workers. It's very sad because there has been an initiative deliberately by government to revitalize the Nigerian textile industries. In Kaduna alone, there used to be the UNTL, KTL, Nospin, Nortex, Arewa Textiles.
Tex?
Yes, and they were employing so many people running 3 shifts. The morning shift starts from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. The afternoon shift 3 p.m. to 11. The night shift 11 p.m. till 7 a.m. So 24 hours, 7 days a week, people were engaged and there was a lot of economic activity. And their hope was that this was to be revitalized. Now, this only one that is functioning is now forced to downsize, and that's why RMO is saying that stop smuggling, because when you smuggle in textile products, you're undermining the growth of the one in
this is very sad, honestly. Given again, I think last week we had cause to discuss, the AFCTA, which of course will begin on the 1st of January 2021, and we also looked at the impact of this on our manufacturing sector and industries and all that. And if a company like UNTL, Yusuf, with the number of staff strength is downsizing, what will become of other industries? So this is not really good for us. In 2007, it shut down. In 2020, because of COVID-19 pandemic and of course the national lockdown, it locked down again. And I think according to this paper, the union had to force it to reopen and absorb even some of the staff laid off. So this is very worrisome, and we must not. I mean, it shouldn't be allowed to stay. Something should be done, and not just stopping smuggling, Nadabo, Yusuf. I don't think that alone. You should stop smuggling, but we must ensure that the company, does not, close down.
Yes, and that's what even the government is trying to avoid. These sacks and then retrenchment and the rest of them, because of the effect of this on the economy, on the inflation rate. I mean, on the employment rate in this country and the rest of them. When you look at NSAS, look at all these issues, you find out that the main problem is unemployment.
Yes.
Basically, it's unemployment. And government is addressing that through its various ways and methods and approaches. So many, safety nets have been provided in order to get these youth back to job, back to school, so that the streets become empty. You see, and look at this development.
Yeah, just to even read out what Comrade Issa Aremo, how to revive the sector, what he says here. He says, first of all, industries are in the state, so all state governments must hit the ground running to address the problems of industrial development, not just textile. Beyond bailout, stop smuggling, buy locally produced fabrics through Executive Order 003, and put sustainable industrial policies. Key to mass sustainable jobs is industrialization. And this is very critical if we must play a leading role in the African Free Continental Trade Initiative, which we have signed on to.
In fact, our charity should begin at home. If we want to improve the economy, we must increase production. And one way of increasing production are these industries that we are shutting down.
We must do this so that we don't end up like AGOA, where we're part of AGOA, yet we're not benefiting from the AGOA. Yes, because we don't have the right products or the capacity to do that. well, good news. Nigerian stocks are also heading for the best annual run since 2013, recording its highest return, rising 45.7% this year, and it's among 93 equity indexes tracked by Bloomberg.
Yes, that's good. But what
does that mean?
Where we are not doing well is the area of fighting COVID-19. The NCDC has raised alarm that the national health system is struggling to cope with the increased number of COVID-19 infections. The Director General, Nigeria Center for Disease Control, Dr. Chikoye Ekwazu, says, we just faced the worst week since the outbreak. We had more cases in Nigeria last week than any other previous week since the outbreak in March. And sadly, our appeals for COVID-19 protocols have not been heeded. He says that events continues as full, social activities are on in full, and we are doing an examination. He says by January, it will be tough because we'll be seeing the result and the consequences of what we are doing.
You know, talking about COVID-19, we lost the first professor of criminology, I think yesterday. That's Professor Femi Odekunle.
Yes.
And the report we're hearing is that he probably passed on, in one of the isolation centers, here in the FCT after, testing positive. Details are still unclear, but that's what is being reported.
He was one of the 3 persons that died from COVID-19 yesterday.
Yes.
And President Muhammadu Buhari has expressed shock about his death. He described him as a valued friend, an intellectual with impeccable knowledge in criminology, governance, and administration. He described his death as shock and has prayed for the repose of his soul. But it goes forward to say that even that same yesterday, we had, by this morning, we had 749 COVID-19 cases. And the epicenters are still Lagos, which had 299, Plateau 131, Kaduna 83, Federal Capital Territory 74. So
let's look at the editorial which is coming from The Nation about the National Export Promotion Council's zero oil plan. They say some progress has been made, but it is still far from target.
Yes, zero oil plan was to ensure that our 90% dependent on oil was reversed. And the whole initiative was that there was plan to ensure that we will have other import substituted alternatives, including crops. There's one policy which was described as one product policy, which was to initiate that export initiative that will reduce our dependency on oil. But the editorial is saying that this has not been followed up enough. And if you go back, during the era of the President Olusegun Obasanjo, there was an initiative to give funds to every state to concentrate in producing agricultural products that it is predominant and good in. It never came to...
At least one has been earmarked for every zone.
So now we're having this challenge that this was a bold initiative to diversify our economy, drive our attention, economic means of survival from oil to other initiatives. We were all encouraged when we started exporting yam and other agricultural products, and it's very positive sources of earning foreign exchange. But all of a sudden, we are going down.
But do you think it's as a result? It's a non-policy thing? I don't think so, because there are enough policies to ensure that, to diversify our economy. I mean, in terms of policies, I think we've got a robust, policy by this administration to ensure that. But what we've seen play out, Yusuf, the issues of banditry, insecurity, and again, some natural disaster, which probably, will impact on efforts, by
especially in this year.
Yes.
When you look at floods in these areas, bandits, killing farmers, and of course bandits, in Kebbi, where you find, onion becoming so much of a hot cake because of these factors.
So I think again, beyond policy, we've got policy. Maybe we must look at efforts to also tackle security issues. I mean, do more in the area of security, protecting the farmers and our farmland, rice farm. How much was eroded away. What is happening to other agricultural, inputs. Yesterday, maize farmers cried out. I think, we heard the story about maize. We don't know whether we have sufficient maize or we don't have sufficient maize, on ground. But the report says, look, we do have enough maize. There's no maize scarcity.
Yeah, federal government debunked that really. There's enough maize. We shouldn't be importing maize.
We're raising alarm that there's scarcity of maize and it might affect the feeds for poultry products. But they have been assured that there is sufficient maize. In fact, on this Good Morning Nigeria program, when the idea was mooted to import maize, I can remember Kingsley raising an alarm that how are we going to import maize? We should be exporting maize, not importing maize. So
we have everything it takes to have so much maize in this country.
Yes. Well, just before we let you go, it's just a pointer. Federal government is blaming states for load testing, and so it's on the inside page of the Daily Trust. And then I'd just like to point out there's just a cartoon photo of the day. We probably would not have it. It's an African saying. It says, when the ear hears, the body is safe. So when you hear and you comply with the COVID-19 protocols, you're safe, you remain safe. So Bayo, you exhausted your time.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you, Bayo. We'll see you tomorrow. Don't go away, we'll be right back.
The counsel of our fathers.
I will urge and advise our younger generation to use talent and brain to sort out problems, not arms.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together. We have come to the end of another successful year, and we wish to appreciate all those that mean so much to us. Our sponsors, our clients, government at all levels, corporate bodies, advertisers, religious bodies, civil society groups, political parties, and above all, you, our esteemed viewer. Together, we made 2019 great. Together, we shall make 2020 even greater. That is why we say, thank you. This is wishing you a Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year.
Nigerian youths are about the greatest assets the country has at the moment. It is therefore not surprising that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari is strategically responding to the yearnings of the youth through multiple projects and programs. Youth entrepreneurship support years by Bank of Industry, the Youth Investment Fund by the CBN, and several other conditional cash transfer programs. Recruitment of 774,000 social workers, majority of whom are youth, and so many other projects that are beneficial to youths directly or indirectly. If the administration can do all this, definitely with a degree of patience and time, it can achieve more. Nigerian youths must come together to say no to terrorism, no to vandalism, and no to all disruptive tendencies. Hashtag Youth for Greater Nigeria, pacifying the youths, unifying the nation.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous, whether you do it for fun or for political gains. Real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
Do you know that 35% of every girl child and women are raped on daily basis? Some are killed in the process, some take their lives in shame, others remain emotionally dead for life. It is sad. This culture is not ours, definitely not African. How did we allow bad culture to infiltrate and take over? Even if you lack fear for the law, what of fear of God? And you, why do you cover up rape acts when it happens? Remember, a problem shared is a problem half solved. Never cover any rape act because a rapist is a murderer. It could be you or your loved ones next. Women must be treated like the prize gem they are. Say no to rape.
Hotspur ended 2020 in a slump, but will their fortunes change when they take on Leeds United in their first game of 2021 on Saturday? It's Tottenham versus Leeds United on the Premier League Live, showing on the NTA network from 1 p.m. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Axis Bank, Bye Jebu, Lipton, and Close Up in association with Goal.com.
Good morning, Nigeria. It's reaching you from the Nigerian Intelligence Authority, and continuing our discussion or conversation on highlights of 2020. It's time to meet our guests for today. Let's welcome Abiodun Adendi, Associate Professor of Mass Communication, Bez University. Thank you very much for joining us on our review this morning.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. We also have Mazi Afam Osigbe, former Secretary General, Nigerian Bar Association. Mazi Afam is preparing Good Morning Nigeria today, and the last maybe for this year in his capacity, rather the last for this year and the first for us as a senior advocate of Nigeria. You're welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
All right, we'll give you more details in the course of our production. But also seated here with us in the studio is Dr. Ismail Bello. Dr. Ismail is a lecturer and a public affairs analyst. Always good to have you with us on the program, Dr. Bello.
Thank you and good morning.
All right, gentlemen, let's, well, in our tradition, we're reviewing 2020. We started on a very high, in January, when, of course, high hopes in terms of, what the government was doing and expectations from the policies that have been, enunciated even in the year before. And suddenly, Corona Medusa unleashed its gorgons. And here we are. So let's start with an evaluation. And I'd like to start with the political scientist amongst us, Associate Professor Adendi. How do you evaluate 2020?
Well, that's all right. It's like every other year. It comes with its own mixed bag. And like Father Kuka said, it's one of annus mirabilis and annus horribilis. But essentially, we'll say it's one of annus horribilis because of its many downsides. And I remember one of Frederick Fox's popular novel, The Day of the Jackal. This time, the year is not one of the jackal. It's not the day of the jackal, but it's the year of the jackal. Mm-hmm. Because it came with so many contradictions that nearly drowned this country. There was high hope, like you said in your introduction, because for the first time, the budget was passed, to fall in tandem with the Gregorian calendar, January to December. And there was high hope, of course, that there will be proper implementation. But going into the year, there was a need for us to review it. And of course, it was reviewed. The confusion started. Oil price became unpredictable. It plummeted. Hopes were lost. And of course, there has to be debt rescheduling and all of that. So many deaths, high-profile deaths. Of course, we lost the chief of staff to the president, Malam Abba Kyari, and so many other personalities also died, and many other Nigerians who are probably unsung. Very unfortunate year to that extent. But of course, there are also some good takeaways, even if they are not much. First of all, in the area of politics, we had two very smooth off-cycle elections in Ondo and Edo. The Edo election was particularly gratifying because it's signposted the hope for us that transparency, credibility, and fairness was going to be introduced into the electoral process, because the election was peak and span. It was smooth and almost immaculate, going by the testimonies of observers and even contestants themselves. So that's a very good point. And we are hoping that from the lessons of the Edo election, we'll proceed into other elections, introducing electronic process into our electoral process, much more than we witnessed in the Edo election, even though the Edo election was a very good beginning. The ZPAT system, we hope that it will be introduced at the end of the day fully. The card reader system, we are hoping that it will be improved upon so that cases of failure will not arise again. Then electronic transmission of results, we also hope that we can improve on it massively. Our next chairman has promised that all these things will be ramped up and consistent with the hope that the electoral bill will also be passed, so that we can perfect our election as we go on. Then let's go to the Ondo election. Ondo election was not bad too. It came on the back of the Edo election. There were downsides and allegations of voter inducements and all of that. Well, these are characteristics of our election. We also hope that at some point, our elections will not be transactional. It will not be, the process will not be commodified, so that we need to have an election where people vote freely and fairly. Good lessons from those two elections, off-cycle elections. But again, there's also another downside that we need to also mention.
Your general impression, we'll get to the specifics.
Okay.
Yes. So,
finally, before I round up, it's also important to say that we had two cases where we would say that elections were not necessarily legitimate, but they were legal. Imo and Bayelsa. Another lesson for us, those two states technically are joining the list of off-cycle elections that we're having in this country. We already had 6, but we had Imo and Edo somewhat joining them. So overall, I would say that it's a mixed bag, but life itself is a mixed bag. Life itself is not fair. It came with a lot of challenges, but the task for us is to elevate ourselves above those challenges, and propel ourselves towards economic stability and sustainability. But how do we do this? To look beyond oil. Okay, look beyond oil, diversify our economy, expand our resource base like we've been saying, concentrate on agriculture. What about steel? What about minerals? These are the potentials where we still have, these are areas where we still have potentials.
Yeah, these are
and we have to really, that's right.
Yeah, we'll look into 2021 as we progress in the discussion and the conversation, really. When you ask this question in Nigeria, we are about 200 million or thereabout. If all of us will speak, say, assess 2020, we're all going to have so many different assessments, really, because everybody felt it. So, Dr. Bello, what would you add to what the associate professor said as regards assessment or assessing 2020?
Thank you very much for having me. As the prof has said, we've had it high and low in the year 2020. The COVID-19 disrupted a lot of things. Insecurity in northwestern Nigeria, with the kidnapping of the Kankara boys. We thank God for the proactive nature with which the government of Katsina, Zamfara, the military, the federal government were able to swing into action to bring back our boys, to avoid the Chibok scenario, which really dented the image of Nigeria within the international system. So with COVID-19, there's been insecurity in the northwest. We believe mechanism will be put in place to ensure for security in the northwest. It is tackled to make it easy for individuals to go to the farm, people to easily travel around the northwest. So I'll be focusing more on the security aspect. There's more to be done when it comes to security in northwestern Nigeria and northeastern Nigeria.
All right, thank you, Dr. Bello. Thank you for letting us know your area of interest. So let me bring in the brand new senior advocate of Nigeria, and one of the 72 senior advocates of Nigeria, of course, recognized this year, 2020, and of course, respectively earned I must say, congratulations once again.
Thank you so
we on Good Morning Nigeria, and I appreciate you. You've been one of our very favorite and consistent, analysts on this program, Mazia Famusigwe. So back to our conversation. When you think of 2020, what goes on in your mind, both individually and collectively as a nation?
Well, I think Prof did a good job of bringing out the highlights of 2020. But I think, just like my friend Bello did, we should focus on the economy, security of lives and property. Now, the is food security. I mean, he inferentially referred to it. Farmers are not able to harvest their products in the northwest, in the northeast, where there are reports of some sort of, I don't know what to call it, being imposed on people before they can access their farms, monetary, I'm trying to use the right word. Now, inability of people to evacuate foods, and also the effect of government policies on the ability of people to earn their livelihood, like when there's a lockdown on grounds of public health, and the need for government to also put in social infrastructure to cushion the effects of these things. And I will look at failure of governments at different levels to ensure that palliatives budgeted for and provided for get to the people. And here's such disturbing news as people saying, oh, they kept it to be shared on their birthday. People appropriating the commonwealth of the people for their own personal aggrandizement. Politicians branding government-sponsored palliatives with their personal their pictures, party logos, politicizing it as it were. And then the ability of the various security agencies to focus on intelligence gathering rather than on reactionary actions. Like, you worry about, when we talk about Kankara action, mass kidnap, I worry more about the fact that these individuals were able to move these children across many communities and even across state lines. And the failure of government to gather information, and the failure of the emergency lines to work, and the ability of government to be able to intercept this. And even you can't plan such a mass operation without information of it filtering out. And then fear in these communities to even share information, not knowing who to share them with. And then overall the effect on the economy, which is experiencing a depreciation in the value of the currency, and the fact that we are becoming more and more an import-based economy, and the CBN keeps trying to defend the naira, and we keep depleting our foreign reserve in order to import some of the items that we can locally produce. A whole lot of issues for us to talk about.
You have talked about, sorry, Yusuf, we have talked about so many things, but just, to be consistent with my question, I know there are a lot of people who would wish 2020 to vanish. I mean, they can't wait for 2020 to go. But there are also a lot of other people who would say different strokes for different fruits. And you are one of those. I'm sure you will look back at 2020 and you'll be glad you did. So are there positives also that we can look back and say, yes, out of, this difficult situation, I've also come out honey?
Well, if I'm to talk about myself, then that would be insensitive to the plight of the many. But there are, of course, there are highlights. They talked about the elections, the need for us to focus. And for once, this year I was very proud of INEC introducing the electronic transmission of results, and it worked perfectly well in Ondo State. Maybe not as well in Ondo State. And they talked about transactional politics. And for me, it may not be a highlight, but it's something we should focus on because it shows the loss of faith by the electorate in government. They do not believe that you do anything for them. So for them, it's about, let me get what I can from you. But the fact also that certain predictions concerning Africa entirely and the third world did not come to be. Like people like Bill Gates being quoted as saying that bodies were picked from the streets in the third world. And this is not happening. And I must say, as hamstrung as it may have been, the federal government and indeed the states and local governments have done their bit in managing the coronavirus. Maybe the public communication aspect of it need to be stepped up because many people still say that the COVID-19 is a scam. It is not real. There may be need for more education to be done, and then there also need for religious leaders to work with governments to ensure that this matter is taken much more seriously, especially now that a mutant
variant of it has come on board, and is which is reported to be much more transmissible. But in all, the fact that a larger percentage of the population has remained alive and not sick, and the government has, as much as possible in the circumstance, maintained security in certain aspects of the country, and as bad as the economy appear to be going into recession, whereas our head is still above water. Of course, we can't write off 2020. But talking about making myself a standpoint for it will be unfair and selfish.
Don't worry, we'll get back to that. You can't escape that anyway, because you are the newest senior court of Nigeria, in this place, and of course one of the 70 that were really crowned as such. Professor Abiodun Adeni, we started talking about insights, talking about COVID-19 and the rest of them. Let's not lose track of this COVID-19 thing. When we are going through the newspaper review here, and even yesterday I had the chairman of the PTF, saying that the subnational level, that states and the rest of them are not really doing the testing as required. And if they are really doing, we could have really gotten so much and so many of, indications and cases of COVID-19 and so many other things. Mazi talked about the palliatives and the rest of them. Now, 2020 has been so much of a hard year, especially when we talk about the coronavirus. That's right. It is one of the greatest, setbacks and the negatives we had that compounded almost everything and confused almost everything. Do you see us really getting out of this as soon as possible, and then, being a little bit hopeful in trying to address these issues, looking at the myriad of problems we have on this?
Well, in terms of hope, I have hopes because as a human being, hope is innate to us. Yeah. By the time we stop having hope, then we're ready to go. So I'm hopeful, and of course, first we need to look at our biology, perhaps our genetics and our environment. Somehow, it's still mysterious. How the pandemic has not ravaged Africa and Nigeria the way some predictors actually said it was going to do. But of course, it's also shameful that we've not researched it well enough. What I think we're trying to do is what we are not capacitated enough to do, trying to ape and idolize the Western nations, probably taking some of the measures they are taking. They lock down, we lock down. They introduce palliatives, we introduce palliatives, and they were shutting their borders. Of course, we shut our borders too. And the campaigns, everything they're asking us to do, we did it. But of course, the impact is not as immense, it's not as intense in our environment as it is in their own environment. So against that background, I would have expected us that going forward, we should be original, we should be creative in our own methodology. But we will have been able to do that if we have researched enough the reason why we are not as affected as those other countries. That's the mystery.
But one of the reasons being put forward is the lack of testing, enough testing, especially from the presidential task force.
If there are not enough testing, then there should have been more deaths. Because if you are not tested, that means you are infected, and obviously
maybe the deaths are not being reported.
Well, all these things are hypotheses, they are assumptions. Exactly. And that's why I'm saying there should be enough investigation, enough research, so that at least we can place in hand, we can have data, we can place in hand on what the solution could probably be. Because if you want to profile solutions to a problem, you need to investigate it, research it, understand the problem before you can profile a solution. But having said that, anyway, we have to also commend the PTF. They've done their best, in the circumstance. They've been preaching a lot, they've been admonishing the populace a lot. But of course, there's still room for improvement. For instance, I've been critical of the monolithic messaging. In the last 9 months, it's just been one message on the podium: wear a mask. What about the other element of the non-pharmaceutical method? Like hand hygiene, like social distancing. Why are you neglecting those ones? With every due respect to them. In the United Kingdom, for instance, you see how they vary these messages how they varied it over time. You will say, well, it has not impacted on the number of on people who have contracted it. But of course, let's do the first things first. And our situation is different from their own. Our society is largely an illiterate society. Our people are much more difficult to educate, and that's what we're seeing. People still disbelieving the fact that COVID-19 exists. So we need to do a lot more work, and that's why I've advocated in some other for as well that we probably need to do morbid messaging and probably do guerrilla communication. We need to understand that strategic behavior change communication can be very, very difficult. Because people have imbibed a line of behavior over years, and for you to change it momentarily can be very, very difficult. Because of this difficulty, then you need to be drastic and abrasive in your messaging. We're not doing enough of that, and that's why we see people take advantage of the situation and still think, unfortunately, that it's an elite problem, that it's an elite disease, that the elites are dying. Forgetting the fact that, yes, when an elite dies, papers will report it, everybody will know. But when a non-elite probably dies, nobody will hear about it. So you now think that the elites are dying more than the non-elite. So a lot more has to be done on the part of government. Yes, they've done their best, but we still need more to be done for us to actually stem the tide of this pandemic.
All right, Professor Adini, thank you. Dr. Bello, so we kicked off with coronavirus pandemic, which was the turning point, in 2020. In other parts of the world where the vaccine, attempts are being made to get the people vaccinated, and in the US, for instance, they are making frantic, efforts to reach what they call the herd community as soon as possible. But there are also indications that for us in this part of the world, or those who call the third world countries, the vaccine might not get to us until 2023. I don't know if this is good news or not, but just this morning, I think I listened to, the CNN say the president-elect, Biden, is saying that, look, vaccination alone will not help. So do you think from our approach, ab initio, are there lessons that we could draw going forward, to even address the new strain? Are there lessons that we have learned from the way we have approached it that has helped us, stabilize the caseload?
Thank you very much for the question. Before I go into that question, let me still talk about 2020 and some positivity. With the coronavirus, you see institutions, academic institutions, medical institutions around the world were able to introduce e-learning, e-medical rounds, and so on and so forth. So this is a lesson for us down here in Nigeria that we could do it. For example, in Biz University, immediately the lockdown started, we were able to start e-classes, Google Meet, Google Classroom, and so on and so forth. Talking about vaccine, this goes back to the points raised by my able professor, my very senior colleague. We need to invest in research and development in Nigeria. When you talk about the university system, most people think it's all about teaching classes, writing articles just to be published for promotion. But there's need for that university-industry collaboration from communication, pharmaceuticals, medicals, even those in political science and international relations, to develop policies that will guide the industry, to develop policies that will guide the government as to how to address social ills, for example, or social problems. For example, COVID-19, which came, you can see there's a collaboration between a pharmaceutical company in the UK and Oxford University. We have that in United States, Pfizer, and so on and so forth. So there is need to look at the aspect of investing in research and development. We shouldn't just depend on government. Industry should come in, pharmaceuticals, automobiles, and so on and so forth, should come in to see how they could collaborate with the higher institutions of learning across the country to see how you give grant, professional chairs, and so on and so forth. They conduct research and, in fact, suggest solutions on problems even before they come. That is why you could see in the span of just less than a year, UK, US have been able to come up with a vaccine, not about third world country. To correct Innovation Research 2023, there are some statements out there that said hopefully by the end of 2021, it is not just coming from US or UK. We have the Russian vaccine too, which could get to the developing countries. So there's a lot to be, we should learn from this issue of COVID-19. There's need to improve on funding for education, that is one, then also improve on industry collaboration with higher institutions.
Well, many thanks, Dr. Bello. Mazi Afam, when we look at 2020 generally, we find out that a lot have really taken place, especially in the judiciary and the justice dispensation and dispensation of justice in this country. We've really gone ahead in trying to see to it that a lot of cases have been, dispensed, and a lot is being done, especially from the government side and the judges themselves. And one of such is the elevation of people like you to Senior Advocate of Nigeria, 70 most recently. How would you, assess justice dispensation in 2020?
Well, I would say, considering the number of months that there was a lockdown, that national life and other aspects of life were affected, the judiciary has creditably discharged itself very well. And then, like Dr. Bello said, 2020 COVID-19 and the attendant issues arising therefrom has also made us to have a rethink. Many courts introduced virtual court settings, and then also we needed to look at the way we do things. Many courts were forced to schedule hearings according to time. I mean, it made people to rethink that the idea of gathering lawyers to sit in the courtroom all day waiting for their matters to be called may actually not be ideal. So you may have time belts, so your matter could be by 10, 11, 12, so that you come when there is need for you, round off and go. And also the fact that some courts delivered rulings virtually, and it brought about the argument of whether a court giving its ruling or decision virtually amounted to, or holding a hearing virtually amounted to having a hearing in public. And I think the Attorney General of Ekiti State took that to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was of the opinion there was no dispute, and in an obiter dictum, one of the justices said that, look, it did not violate the Constitution. But there was need for us to rethink our laws and try to give them purposive interpretation and look and interpret them in the context of certain circumstances we never imagined were possible. And so the judiciary has handed down some judgments that many people applauded in some circumstances, and many people had cause to say, look, there's need for us to look at these judgments again, as far as it concerns the electoral process, Bayelsa, Imo State, and all that. But indeed, at the end of it all, is the need for us to realize that as human beings, we must always be braced to face situations we never thought were possible, modify our ways of doing things, come up with policies and measures to tackle them, and ensure that the society continues to run orderly, and then also care about the lives of those who either sit as judges or those who appear before them as counsel or other court users, so that we maintain a balance to ensuring that cases are heard, justice is done, and also there is safety of those who are involved in this process, either as support staff or active participants in the whole process. So in all, it's not been a very bad year.
Okay, I know this is your comfort area, but I will just keep you whole and take you back to COVID-19 before I take you up on the judiciary. Professor Adeniyi and Dr. Bello raised, issues which I conclude could be gaps in the way we have handled COVID-19. They have raised the issue of messaging and behavioral changes, need for that, and also industrial collaboration with, of course, higher institutions. What are your thoughts about that and how we have managed?
And I'm glad Dr. Bello said that. A few years ago, I was involved in a discussion, and the aggregate of views was that our educational institutions do not produce people who are fit for business. We produce people to believe that they need an employment to survive. So there's not much entrepreneurial content in our education system. And that's why I was glad he introduced the issue of research. Schools like MIT, Harvard, and many other schools in the Western world, Oxford he mentioned, Cambridge, they drive many businesses because they spend money on research and development, and businesses invest in these universities. And so these universities are able to generate money. And I'm glad because we're having this aspect of the conversation, because whenever ASU talks about university autonomy, without talking about the content of the autonomy, the universities being able to generate funds to stand by their own, running postgraduate schools to generate funds, not being tied to the apron strings of government, and rethinking this idea of talking about autonomy in the sense of allow us to be our own, but without also insisting on doing things to make them stand on their feet, and also being of practical use to the society, and producing students to be able to think on their own, knowing that there's no government in the world that can provide job for every person that needs a job, that you must produce people who go in there not to cram and vomit them, as we say, in an exam hall and then be graded based on their ability to learn by rote. But the ability to think on their feet, come up with practical ideas. And this is where I'm glad he mentioned Oxford. Oxford and Moderna collaborated to produce the Oxford Moderna vaccine. How many of our universities are researching into it presently? One of the female researchers in the BioNTech Pfizer drug vaccine had been working on this almost all her life, was rejected, lost her job because people did not believe in what she was doing. But she kept at it. How many of our lecturers even have the ability to do that or to seek individual funding for that? Because we must also rethink our educational system. We must not always blame government for everything.
How many of our universities are even applying the virtual teaching that you're saying?
None of them. Many of them refuse to do it. Many of them, well, I'm sure there are many lecturers who can't even turn on a computer. Let's face reality. Because we must rethink the way we do things. Government cannot do everything for every person. And lest we deceive ourselves. Even the UK projects that it will take almost a year before the entire populace gets the vaccine. And that's why they are prioritizing the aged, those who are vulnerable, the healthcare providers, and those who are the frontline persons, before it gets to other persons. And there's no hard and fast rule as to how this mutant variant of the virus may affect those who may not have underlying condition. The first death of a person who didn't have underlying condition, I read, was reported this week.
So you believe there's a gap in content in universities?
Absolutely, absolutely. The universities just produce people that have paper qualifications. And we need to look at that. We have so many science faculties. In what ways are they contributing to our nation? And when we talk about vaccine, we should know that these companies are Western world-based companies, and they don't even have enough for these Western countries. And we cannot even compete with them in terms of saying, let us pay you top dollar so that you give it to us. In what ways are we trying to research to produce our own? Russia has come up with their own vaccine, which the West is discrediting. I don't know, but we need to see its effect on the populace. But must we wait for those vaccines to be made available to us? Can we afford? Can't we look at them and produce generic versions of them where available, because there are certain treaties that allow us, for purposes of public health, to maybe not to respect certain intellectual property in the interest of the people. Must we wait to import them? What are our scientists doing? In what ways is government trying to drive research in some of the public-owned research institutions? If we don't do this, nobody knows when COVID-19 will go away.
Okay, yeah. I like Professor Adeni to you want to ask?
Not to ask him really, but really add to what he said. Looking at COVID-19 generally, and then the government's effort and Nigeria's efforts in trying to, curb the problem and then get vaccines for it. Government, came up sometimes with, millions of naira, is that, as a reward for those who really come up with a vaccine for it. That was that proposal. And of course, looking at research and some other things which Dr. Bello spoke about and you really initiated, the kind of deaths. The deaths in Kano were things that were supposed to be investigated so much, and then, results coming out to show that this is what the cause was, and this is how we are going to approach it. And the vaccine thing is still laying there. The research thing is still another big issue we need to look at. Yeah. Professor, I'm looking at these, mix-ups. Yeah. 2021 is just by the corner. I think we shouldn't be doing things the way we used to do in 2020.
Very well indeed. Yeah, I think because there's this popular saying by Albert Einstein that if you continue to do the same thing like you've been doing before and you expect a different result, it's just going to be a mirage, So we need to plan differently. We need to be very much more original and creative, like I said earlier. But more importantly, with respect to these vaccines, ordinarily from the history of the production of vaccines.
You look sober.
Yeah, well, it can be very sobering, really. Yes. From the history of the production of vaccines, if you look at the history of plagues, from the Black Plague to the bubonic plague, to the Spanish flu, and of course even to HIV and the one we're having at hand, vaccine can take a long time to produce. Sometimes it takes up to 3-4 years. But because of Operation Warp Speed by Donald Trump, and perhaps because of how ferocious, how vicious COVID-19 has been, of course, scientists got to work as quickly as possible, and in 8-9 months they have been able to produce a vaccine, so to say.
We cannot write off Nigerian universities yet. We cannot write off Nigerian research institutions yet. Many of them are still at work. And of course, I'm aware of Babcock University. Many private universities are in session. Like my colleague said, Bayes University is in session. And usually when you begin this kind of, when the vaccine candidate is in process, there are about, so many of them, about 300 of them are in the works now. When they're in the process, you do not announce them until you begin to make progress.
By Nigerians?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Nigerian universities, research institutions are working on it. So they cannot begin to announce it or maybe their effort until the effort has yielded a result, sort of. So you don't celebrate effort, it's result that we celebrate. And that's what we saw in Pfizer and in Moderna. So baristas should not write off Nigerian universities just yet. They are still silver lining. Many of them are still doing very well, irrespective of the downsides. And of course, some of these challenges are not necessarily peculiar to these institutions alone. Anything you see in any Nigerian institution, it's a reflection of the bigger picture of the Nigerian society. And that's why we keep talking about us having the need for us to have, a helicopter view of the problem that we are having so that we can deal with it collectively, through the prism of the right leader, not necessarily the political leader alone, but all levels of leadership, military leadership, civil service leadership, public sector leadership, and for each and every Nigerian to contribute, conscientiously from the little corner that you are occupying, not necessarily depending on just the leader alone. We are all leaders in our own right. If we have all these leaders contributing from all the micro units, by the time it coalesces at the macro level, of course, we'll have a different country. So whatever you see reflecting in the Nigerian university, whatever you see reflecting in the Nigerian police, reflecting in the Nigerian army, it's a picture of the Nigerian society itself, which can be remedied through appropriate leadership, beginning from the top to down, not just from the top down alone, but also from bottom up. That's the point I need us to emphasize. But again, maybe before I round up in this session, we keep talking about insecurity, and the response of the military, response of the army. We've forgotten that there's a fundamental question that we also have to address. And this is the question of our population, growing so rapidly, faster and higher than our revenue. Our population is reportedly growing about 6 to 7 million a year. We are a nation of 200 and something million people. As at the time, we had independence with the United Kingdom. We were about at the par with the United Kingdom in terms of population. But the United Kingdom is one of the strongest economies in the world. They have a population of less than 70 million. We have a population, one of the poorest countries in the world, a population of 206 million. We need to address that cancer that is growing and overwhelming our institutions and our resources. So if it is not addressed, the army will try with all the hardware, all the hard power they have, they will just be overwhelming them and they will not be able to deal successfully, with insecurity, just like the police. That perhaps we need maybe either a population policy or a way to conscientize the populace, to understand that you do not just begin to bear children. No religion.
It was a topic we handled on Good Morning Nigeria. Actually,
fantastic.
Yes, we had dealt with that, how we manage our population, dynamics and effectively. It was excellently done, discussed here on the program, and probably we may have to, revisit it again in the new year. But just before we leave the coronavirus and then go to Judiciary, which Yusuf already ticked off, Dr. Bello, did Leonard Silk, did he hit at the core of challenges, affecting the whole university ecosystem in terms of content gap with regards to research and collaborations with medical industries?
Yes, thank you very much. Indeed, as my prof said again, there have been some progress in some institutions. We shouldn't write them off. But, there's this trust issues when it comes to the Nigerian populace and those at the higher echelon of power. When NAFDAC said they were working on vaccine, it was so unfortunate that on social media, Nigerians were making jest of the NAFDAC vaccine. So as we said, they need to improve on the content in the university system, not just the medical side, as I said, but even social sciences, law, and other aspects of the university system. There's need for more industry university collaboration to ensure that content are tilted towards the need of the Nigerian state. You know, the content shouldn't just be what has been brought down by the global West, or even taken from the East, Russia being an emerging power today. It should be tilted towards the need of the Nigerian state. What are those needs? As Prof said, population issues, economic issues. How do we diversify from over-reliance on oil to looking at agriculture and other sector of the economy? So as I stated, they need to look into our curriculum from medical to other faculties in the university system. So I believe the SAN was correct. We need to improve on the curriculum in the university system.
Many thanks, Dr. Bello, but let me just hang on to you a little bit there and then shift gear a little bit from the coronavirus into something different in 2020. In January 2020, you know, we marked the 50 years of the end of the Civil War. And that was a political milestone that really kept us together, where, you know, that very dictum of saying that no victor, no vanquish was really put in place. And today we're still hanging on to that because we're still united. There were so many theories and other things that came up. That is, so by so time, Nigeria will break up, by so years, Nigeria will scatter and things like that. But we still won. The Civil War could not just get us anywhere, apart from making us much more stronger. Remember one of our own Enlightenment jingles, President Obasanjo said that we fought one Civil War too many. And that is really a fact. How do you look at the milestone, and how has it really gone in trying to see to it that we still won and will keep continuing to be one?
You see, the Nigerian state, as we have it now, from the north to the south, our strength, you know, lies in our togetherness. I will refer back to what I saw on the social media when there was the increase in price of onion. You can see how it became an issue in southern part of the country. So us, you know, being able to come together and ensure we explore, you know, God-given resources, both natural and even human resources, even in the population. Talking about population, we could use our population, positively to ensure that the youths that are lying fallow, you know, are directed towards entrepreneurial engagement to ensure that, you know, it leads to economic development. Looking at China today, its ability to rise from the backwaters in global economy and global politics is, you know, tied to its using its population to ensure that they are meaningfully engaged. So come back to your discourse on the Nigerian civil law and how, you know, we've come together in the last 50 years or thereabout. It's looking at our population. We should use the population into positivity. Look at how the distrust that we have in the country could be worked on, inter-ethnic marriages, inter-ethnic, you know, mend those fences that leads to division in the country.
All right, Dr. Bello, thank you. And indeed, 2020 marked 50 years of, you know, that no victor, no vanquished, you know, theme, which of course goes on to, you know, bring out issues and programs that unite us as one. And that's one area that the judiciary also played significant role. And that's why, again, I'll, you know, go back to the judiciary, which Yusuf, you know, earlier started, and ask the learned silk here. I know that the 2019-2020 judiciary year ended on that note, where the, I think it's the Legal Practitioners Privilege Committee had to promote 72 lawyers to the rank of Senior Advocates of Nigeria. And what specifically are the responsibilities of the Senior Advocates of Nigeria, and how symbolic was it for the judiciary in terms of justice dispensation?
Okay, now the rank of Senior Advocate is a rank given to lawyers who of not below 10 years post-call. It's a mark of distinction and excellence in the profession. It's a recognition of the work and their contribution to the legal profession. There are different areas of assessing them. But basically, if you ask me, I would say that while these individuals may have been singled out for elevation or for standing out in the profession, it does not nonetheless mean that the other lawyers who have not been so elevated have contributed less to the profession. And when you also consider the fact that it is also given to those who apply, then you have to take cognizance of the fact that some who may deserve that may never apply, and not everybody who applied and wasn't given does not deserve that distinction. What do I mean? Some deserve it, but can't get it because not everybody will be given in that year. But the bottom line to me is the importance of all legal practitioners, whether they are senior advocates of Nigeria or not, to contribute their quota in the maintenance of the rule of law, which is rule 1 of the rules of professional conduct, to do everything that is possible to foster justice in the nation, to also do the right thing, and also not bring before courts cases that ought not to be there in the conduct of their professional life and private lives, to carry on such that the nation would benefit from it. I keep emphasizing this so that we don't go away thinking that a lawyer is less a lawyer because he's not a senior advocate, or a lawyer has become a super lawyer because he is a senior advocate. There's an equality among lawyers despite the distinction. But just like in everything we do, people strive for excellence and distinction. And attaining that distinction should add value to the nation and to the profession, but should not also portray others as not doing just that or being incapable of doing that. And that is why I keep saying that all lawyers contribute positively to national development, to the advancement of the cause of justice. And also the judiciary, in taking cognizance of these persons, also try to encourage many other lawyers, and indeed all other lawyers, to do more for the promotion of the rule of law.
In terms of justice dispensation, speedy justice dispensation, how would you evaluate 2020? Because there were quite a number of issues, that came up. I mean, carryover issues, that affects the judiciary. There was allegations of corruption against, the sector. There were other issues that, came up. So in 2020, were we able to make gains?
Sure, we made gains. Let me say this. As long as the judiciary and the entire justice administration system is manned by human beings, there will always be allegations of corruption. But I would not go as far as that the ICPC has done, to throw up allegations in the air without providing facts to substantiate that, throw up figures without telling us how you arrived at that, telling us people that may be under investigation or where you have facts to press for prosecution. In other words, but it's very important for us to note too that it is good that there's NJC, which also disciplines judges, and there's a legal practitioner disciplinary committee, which also discipline lawyers who may have been found culpable in this. But then all hands need to be on there. People need to come forward with information, and credible information for that. But in all, the judiciary has done well. But in terms of speed, some of these things are hampered by our laws and by rules of court. I watched the various challenges to Biden's victory in the US, and I saw how some of these cases were dispensed with some within a matter of days, less than 1 week. You won't see that in our courts, because in Nigerian courts, say they will serve a defender, it has 21 days, 14 days to respond. Then you have to file a reply. You need to do this to written address. Court takes evidence. Months go. But in the US, in one of the cases, I think from Pennsylvania, went all the way to Supreme Court in less than 3 weeks. You don't see that happening in Nigeria. And I think we need to rethink that. Do we really need all these long timelines, all these voluminous documentation? Can some of these issues be taken, and in a matter of days, and the court gives its opinion within a few hours? The US Supreme Court, even though it was, and they give their decisions on weekends. Some of the arguments are taken on Saturdays, Sundays, and the court comes out with a decision. Are there not things we should copy? And I keep saying, what worked in the electoral challenge laws under the 1979 Constitution that has suddenly become obsolete or failed to give us results? Under the 1979 Constitution, electoral challenges were resolved before swearing in. You didn't have judges being moved from one part of the country to another. The state chief judges were trusted enough to set up tribunals to take up election issues arising from their states. Suddenly we think that the judges in that state can no longer be trusted. So you uproot them from their homes, from their courts. They go to far-flung places to sit. We spend huge money and we still complain that we lack confidence in the outcome of some of these processes. What are we not getting right? Why must an electoral process under the fourth alteration, section 285 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, you have 6 months to challenge a pre-election case. The court has up to 6 months. And in some cases, from the recent decisions, the decisions must be handed down before the person is sworn in. And then these cases take 3 months. You're saying somebody has presented a forged certificate or something. A court keeps hearing and say, I have 6 months. And the man gets sworn in. And if you read the Electoral Act, it says that the court shall make an order disqualifying such a person. Meaning that if some of these cases are not resolved before the man wins the election, even though the court has the entire time, you're wasting your time. Can't we rethink some of these issues? And then the number of cases that go to our courts. Why must a gubernatorial election go all the way to the Supreme Court? What happened when it stopped at the Court of Appeal? Can't we amend our constitution to reduce the burden on our courts? Why must a chieftaincy matter from my village go all the way to the Supreme Court? Why must a landlord-tenant matter go all the way to the Supreme Court? Shouldn't we amend the constitution to put in place some things that there are human beings who are treating these cases and they are overburdened, and so it will affect the speed at which they decide some of these cases. Sorry, I'll have to stop.
Yeah, sure. You're raising a lot of issues here, and you're part of the courts, part of the bar, part of the judiciary, and you know all these things. Now we're hearing this from you as if something should be done about that, really. Sure. And when there are gaps, especially in electoral processes and some other, endeavors, you find, the bodies rushing to the National Assembly in order to get, reforms done and things like that. Judicial reforms may be necessary, I think.
I know that many years
I'm not asking you to go ahead and answer the question. I'm just yes or no answer there about it, if possible.
I will have to wait for you to finish that. I wouldn't want to answer wrongly.
All right,
we are part of the system, but we operate within the state of the laws. We have to regulate what we are doing. If the laws are amended such that make it easy to speed up these things, why not? And also there are rules, so many rules of court need to be amended to speed up these processes. And lawyers are part of the problems too. Some lawyers will insist, I have 21 days, so I will not file until the very last day. We are part of it. And if I pretend that lawyers have no role to play in it, I deceive myself. Sometimes lawyers even know that the Supreme Court does not have jurisdiction to entertain an appeal after the Court of Appeal has said it, and they take those matters before the Supreme Court. And then the worst scenario we have got this year is even when a matter ought, the Supreme Court has given a decisions, lawyers, and some of them senior lawyers, go back to the Supreme Court to ask for a review and go back a second time after the court.
And there are also issues of two different, judgments from the same court of the same what do you call it?
Yeah, we also have that issue of
conflicting decisions. That's an issue we will also look at when we come back from this break. This is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service. We'll be right back.
My name is Nandom Jamda Muhammad.
Stevita
Hussein Musa.
Goduna Joel Finji.
Said Musa John. I'm a carpenter. I've been doing this for more than 8 years now.
And I said that plantain. Nakai Chimami Shekara Uku.
I've been selling my tomatoes for about 10 years now, and I do it for a better Nigeria.
And I do it for a better Nigeria.
Ina wannan sana'ar lemu ne domin Nigeria ta ci gaba. Ina sa domin Nigeria ta kyau. And you can see how we're doing our small little work to make Nigeria great.
As you can see, I'm a technician and I'm doing it to help myself and to help my generation.
Ina zaune ne a Plateau na business. Kuma ina yin wannan domin ci gaban ƙasar Najeriya.
For a better Nigeria.
This message is from the National Orientation Agency.
Una don hear say dem dey rape about 35% of them girl pikin and even them women sef. Some of them, they even die in the process. Emotional trauma, uncle, they make some of them be like, say, they don't do this one again, they don't go, but they live like ghosts. Some of them, shame don't kuku make them go kill themselves. It's not good, though. This not be our culture. It not fit be the African way. Why we can't allow this kind of yet enjoy body with us, so they loud where. If you know they fear law where man put, you know they fear Baba God there. You self, you where they cover mouth so you see many one they happen. You know what here when the Oyibo talk say problem where they bring come out, they solve and sharply. Remember, person where feel rape, if it's a key person, oh, if it be you, if it be your pikin, if it be person them where you love well. So make we learn to carry women then like diamond where we be. No grief for rape, oh.
New edition of TV Guide is out with special focus on the game changer, His Excellency Governor Abdullahi Sule of Nasarawa State. Broadcasting in a digital economy, Maxwell Logo gives an insight. This edition also features Nancy Naji of AIT, a name synonymous with business. Meet the NCDC boss, Dr. Chikwe Ihekweazu. TV Guide, your indispensable companion, also x-rays the relevance of social media in the modern society. Meet some TV professionals who have impacted their spaces and other inspiring stories in sports, entertainment, and lots more. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or NTA stations nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
Dialogue, empathy, love and unity. These are vital components of nation building.
For all to be well, we appeal that we should refrain from volatile, provocative, inciting messages and language.
Let's build and not destroy.
Hotspur ended 2020 in a slump, but will their fortunes change when they take on Leeds United in their first game of 2021 on Saturday? It's Tottenham versus Leeds United on the Premier League Live, showing on the NTA network from 1 p.m. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Axis Bank, Babai Jebu, Lipton, and Close Up in association with Go.com.
Welcome back. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and we're reaching you from the NTA. We're discussing radar review in 2020 and looking at some aspects of the year that really took place. And we started talking about the judiciary here much earlier, and then we really want to continue with that, at least on certain notes. Claire, you have something to say?
Yes, I wanted to ask, I would like to ask Professor Adeni, because the federal government has been consistent with its fight against corruption. And this is one of the strong, benchmarks for this administration. And I'm wondering how much has the judiciary helped in this fight?
The judiciary is technically supposed to be the institution, that should actually help in structuring the fight, technically. But of course, it's also one institution that you cannot exonerate from the entire mess for different reasons. And that was lately exemplified in the study by the research arm of ICPC. Did that arm only use the judiciary as a sample? It wasn't supposed to be a personal thing against the judiciary, but just used as a sample, to project, like a representative, to project on the bigger picture of the widespread corruption in Nigerian institutions. So I don't want the Sun to see it as a personal attack on the judiciary. It was just a study, which is not only saying that only the judiciary is corrupt. I think every other institution, you find corruption there. And there was a time MBS also use the police as a case study, to demonstrate corruption, which institution is more corrupt. There was time MBS used police, through the support of multilateral organizations. So many other institutions have been used and there's no institution that you actually use it today that you will not see deep-seated corruption. It's actually very, very institutional. And we have made this point severally that our institutions are very, very weak. We live in a system where individuals, are taking the position of institutions. I think that's what Professor Patu Tobin partly called state capture. Individuals are taking the position of institutions. Individuals would rather not, help the institutions to work, but rather want to assume the role of the institution. And in doing that, they keep weakening the institution and making the state to probably look like a failed state, or what is tending towards a failed state. Institutions, I have always said, is the pedestal around which, societies grow. Our institutions need to be strengthened so that corruption, can be reduced, if not eradicated. And how do we do this? First, we have to ramp up the injection or the introduction of technology into our processes and procedure. Let's have less of human interaction with some of these processes so that they cannot be circumvented. The humans interacting with them will not be tempted as we presently are having. Then secondly, if we have strong institutions like the health sector, the educational sector, individuals will not be thinking of monies or funds, to pay school fees, to pay for health facilities, because the state will have provided these facilities ordinarily, and you will not have any reason, to say you want to steal money, much more than you need, to secure yourself, to become a kind of local government. You are funding for your education. You are funding for the education of your family, and you are funding for the education of people around you. This thing works around a concentric circle. There's a concentric circle of corruption in this country. One, the circle, the leader is in at the center, and is supposed to start serving the inner circle, which begins with the populace. But instead of beginning with the populace, it starts, with himself, the family, and the populace as last. So it's a reverse order. First, we have to change the mindset towards reversing that process, probably to some level of sensitization, and beyond sensitization, the activation of the law. The implementation of the law, so that there can be deterrence. Because if there's no deterrence, of course, there's no reason why the person coming behind will not find a reason to say, okay, let me follow the path of the other person, because he has stolen so much billions, and he has not been deterred. He's escaping. So why wouldn't I escape as well?
Okay.
Well, many thanks, Professor. You raised some issues there which are very pertinent too, most importantly. Talking about the state capture, where individuals assume the status, assume the position, and take over institutions, and of course, the activation of the laws. We have so many beautiful laws in this country that we believe we have them. And these laws, the problem with them is having them fully implemented and sanctions being dashed out, and then which serve as deterrent. It's only when you stop, you give people the sanctions, they take it, and then people now see that it's now a severe thing not to engage in that. Then we stop. Dr. Bello, institutions, state capture, that's a nice word. I really like that phrase, state capture. Really, it's a nice one. And that leads to the issue of making a state fail. I don't want to use failed state, but making a state fail, really. Do you see us, moving towards that, going forward, as we look into the future in trying to make Nigeria better? Because I'm hinging this on this very, assumption on the fact that the president said in his broadcast when we marked 60 years that we should set aside all differences and work for Nigeria and make it a better place.
Thank you very much. Going back to the discourse on institution, whenever we infer from United States, people say, oh, they've been practicing democracy for 200 years or more than that. You see, it's all about the personality or the individual at the end of affairs. I was here to discuss the election, and we saw how the ruling party at the top lost in Edo State. The stakes were high. The national chairman of the party was from Edo, and so on and so forth. But you see, the individual of the president and the leader of the country was not, towards making sure at all costs the party have to take over power. So I believe with time, maybe hopefully after his tenure, we have someone like that, or even someone better than that, because, you know, someone better than that able to come in and ensure that it is not all about my political party, it is not all about capturing the state, so to say. The state should work based on the whims and caprice of my party or a selected few, the elite. We believe we are going to get there, we are going to build the institutions. We know some individuals, because of the benefit they get in the country, they may be averse to the application of technology. We've seen that in the education sector, some public schools not adopting e-learning. It goes to the civil service and so on and so forth. When files move from one office to office, there is always envelope attached to those files. So yes, it is not just a top-bottom thing. The individuals, in fact, as far back as 2011, I wrote on attitudinal change. We shouldn't look at the leaders alone. What can we do to better the Nigerian society? What can we do to improve on our democratic experience? What can we do to improve on our societal experience? But as my point goes, the leader at the top certainly plays a key role in building strong institutions. We've seen the US, despite the hues and cry by President Donald Trump, he couldn't tamper with the election. So we could learn from that to improve on our system. So I believe, as we've seen with President Muhammadu Buhari not going the way of some former leaders in these countries that went all out to ensure their political party captured power in some part of the country, we believe we are going to get there.
Also respond to the relationship between the judiciary and, of course, the executive in terms of fighting corruption.
Okay, you see, as my learned son said, we have this problem with the judiciary. They are trying, they are doing their best, but more need to be done in the dispensation of justice. The executive shouldn't be seen as teleguiding the judiciary. The judiciary, we have learned people there, experienced people, that they should know what they are supposed to do. Corruption trials should take lesser time instead of, for example, there was a conviction of a politically exposed person. It has been overturned by a court now. I don't want to go to the technicalities of that. I'm not a law person, but it took almost 4 years before that individual was convicted. So the trial period, you know, should be shortened. As is stated, even with COVID, we should, you know, work towards exploring the opportunity of having virtual court section. The issue of working on our constitution, it's a very contentious issue. So various interests might feel, oh, if you tamper with this, you need to accommodate our interests, and so on and so forth. So it might be difficult to have an general overhaul of the Nigeria's constitution, but I believe from an institutional level, the judiciary, from the Chief Justice of the Federation, the NJC, the lawyers themselves, and so on and so forth, we could, you know, all do our best to ensure that we improve on our judiciary system.
Okay, 2020 politically was dramatic, and I think if we look at it on the surface, we do have made some gains, you know, some significant gains. But Leonard's sake, what would you consider to be the dynamics that, you know, shaped the superstructure, political superstructure?
Well, it's very hard to say. It's very, very hard to say. It's very hard to say. I thought Prof would have been better placed to answer that question.
Get to him.
But if you ask me, there's always a meeting point between the law and politics, whichever way you look at it. Certain political decisions have shaped the politics. We talked about Imo State, talked about Bayelsa, persons who won elections, suddenly being supplanted, if I may use that word, by some other individual, and then also some of them leaving people scratching their heads, and some also making people say, look, there's need for us to go back to the drawing board. And then the NSAS movement, if you ask me, is one of the events this year that shaped the political superstructure in Nigeria. But whichever way you look at all these things, they all call to mind the need for us to build strong institutions for us to ensure that there are checks and balances. The NSAS movement started with people calling for an end to police brutality by SARS, and then it acquired a political element, and it also talks about the way the state reacts or engaging with the populace in addressing issues of dissent and demonstration, and also the way the public should go about so issues of looting, and then the police, in a manner of speaking, deciding to pull back because their men were being attacked, police stations were being burnt, for the populace to also understand the importance of the need for the police despite their shortcomings. And that is, there are issues that I think that if at the end of the day, at the end of this year, we really sit down and address them, it will go a long way in shaping the political dynamics, the relationship between the ruled and the rulers, and then the state institutions, so that we'll be able to build strong institutions, not strong individuals, not in the police. It has to be the IG, which explains why a minor dispute in a remote community, people have to petition all the way for the matter to be transferred to them. Well, these are things we need to look at to build strong institutions so that we don't have political upheavals or disruption of our socio-political life.
Yeah, you know, institutions, that's the key. You really started talking about that. And looking ahead, we really want to have your views, final thoughts on these institutions, because once we can get the institutions right in place, strong enough, then I think we're almost 70% through with the problem. But before we do that, let's go through the tweets Nigerians have been speaking about, we've been doing here this morning. First, Sakim Boyo said 2020 is a challenge year as government and Nigerians battled COVID-19. However, politics wasn't put on hold as voters turned out to vote in 2 governorship elections and by-elections. The NSAS protests and the destruction caused by its hijackers have huge consequences for our politics. What he says.
All right, I think Yusuf, quite a number of them are also speaking on the same issue, the issue of security, need for government to seek holistic approach towards remedying challenges. And this is by Dele Jack Solomon. Titus Monday Knock also is looking towards a more inclusive national identity. Comrade Ngala is also talking about, having, to reduce the number of political parties to, 2 or 3 come 2023 general election. So most of the tweets we're talking about, except, of course, I'd like to take this one by Mutana Farouk, that's also appreciating the work NTA GMN is doing. It says it has helped to enlighten the general public about the policies and programs of government. I say well done to all the staff of the NTA in general, from the DJ to the last person in the cadre of hierarchy. We appreciate you, Mutana Farouk.
Okay, now as we round up this program, let's get the final thoughts of gentlemen here and then see what we can get out of it. We're looking towards 2021, started by saying the institutions have to be strengthened. In a nutshell, maybe 60 seconds. How do we get these institutions strengthened?
Well, we're making progress through the improvements in INEC, one area, and I think going into 2021, there will be progress. We expect further improvement with the Anambra election coming up. But more importantly, we need further sensitization of the populace, of the voters, first, to be much more interested in voting to prevent voter apathy. And secondly, for them to understand that voting is their power, for them to determine value, the kind of value they will get, from the person that will come into government, which means that, the consciousness around materialism should be reduced, because it means that if you're conscious about value, about material things, you're not looking at the future. So that has to be ingrained in our body policy.
Dr. Bello.
Thank you. As I stated earlier, we need attitudinal change. It shouldn't just be about what the state can do for you. You should also look at how you could contribute towards a better Nigeria in 2021.
Well, specifically on institutional reforms and strengthening,
yes,
what can be done?
Yeah, as I stated, it has started with INEC. We could look towards Judiciary, the civil service, and so on and so forth. It goes back to individuals changing their mindset on how they look at their reaction to whatever will be presented by those in government. There are those that are adverse to any form of change. So individuals should learn to accept change.
Okay, now, Mazi, I gave them 60 seconds. I'll give you 120 because you're at the center of this. The issue is the judiciary. If the judiciary can stand on its feet, do the right thing at the right time, just like what we gave examples to the United States, all right? When we do that, at least we'll be able to at least punish, deter people from doing it.
Well, I say that blaming the judiciary may be losing sight of some of the issues. I always say the judiciary is the end point. So if the investigation is not well carried, the prosecution is not well carried, witnesses fail to testify, cases are not conducted well, you can't blame the judiciary, persons are acquitted. We need to build the capacity of our prosecutorial agencies and investigative agencies to do the right work, and then appoint men of integrity into judicial offices, and there should be no interference either from within the judiciary or outside of judiciary in their conduct of their affairs. If we get it right, then we'll be home and dry.
Many thanks, Mazi Afamosigwe, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, former Secretary of Nigerian Bar Association. We thank you so much for your insights this morning.
Thank you so very much for having me.
Associate Professor Abiodun Adeni, it's our pleasure. You've been with us always. We hope to see much more of you in 2021.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Bello, we thank you very much. You've been part of us. We wish you all the best, and looking ahead in 2021, we wish you the best in the new year.
Thank you very much.
And now, let's take sports before we round up.
The Premier League have announced a record 18 cases of coronavirus in the latest round of testing after Manchester City were hit hard. A total of 1,479 players and staff were tested for the virus. The previous record was 16 positive results for the week between November 9 and November 15th, early on in the second lockdown. Man City's game against Everton was postponed, with the current total of 18 positive results up from 11 last week. Newcastle and Man City have both been badly affected by coronavirus in recent weeks. Kyle Walker and Gabriel Jesus both returned positive COVID tests, as well as 2 members of staff. But it's feared the virus has hit at least half of the squad following their trip to London to take on Arsenal in the Carabao Cup last week. Meanwhile, former Tottenham manager Mauricio Pochettino is the main contender to take over at Paris Saint-Germain after Thomas Tuchel was sacked on Tuesday. PSG announced Tuchel's contract had been terminated, and it is understood the club's players are aware Pochettino will replace him. PSG President Nasser Al-Khelaifi thanked Tuchel and said the club will remember the good times we shared. Talks between PSG and Pochettino started at least 2 weeks ago. Tuchel became the Ligue 1 side's boss in June 2018, winning 2 league titles, the French Cup and the French League Cup.
We're counting down to 2021 in a couple of hours. We'll be there maybe in 2 days, thereabout, maybe by tomorrow. We're through with that, and 2021 will be by our sides. And that's Good Morning Nigeria today. We continue our review tomorrow with some other topic. I am Yusuf Abusman. Thank you for watching.
And that's our senior advocate for the people. All right, I am Claire Dilabu Abdurazak. Always remember to keep safe, ensure you abide by the COVID-19 safety protocols, and to have a great day.